If it hadn't been for the dog, no one would have discovered it. No one would have uncovered the trapdoor, the strange odor, or the eerie stillness hidden beneath the floorboards of Little Leaf Daycare. And no one, not a single person, would have believed that behind the cheerful crayon drawings, the sippy cups, and the happy songs, something so profoundly wrong had been concealed in plain view for years. But Diesel knew this Tuesday morning was unlike any other. The sun rose late over Crestfield, Indiana, a town where neighbors still trusted one another. Children biked to the corner store, and nothing bad ever seemed to happen. Officer James Nolan arrived at Little Leaf Daycare, expecting a routine welfare check. A nearby resident had called in a noise complaint claiming she'd heard screaming and scratching during the night. James didn't think much of it. Maybe a raccoon under the porch, or a child throwing a tantrum. These things happened. But Diesel, his retired Marine K-9 companion, was not so indifferent. The old shepherd was slower now, stiff in his joints and graying around the muzzle. But his instincts remained as sharp as the day they served together overseas. Diesel had saved James's life multiple times, pulling him from burning rubble in Kandahar, alerting him to tripwires in Helmand Province. After retiring, James brought Diesel back home to Indiana, where the local police department invited them to join a pilot community K-9 response team. Mostly it was ceremonial. Diesel made appearances at school events and posed for photos with children. Everyone adored him, but this morning, the moment Diesel stepped inside the daycare, something shifted in him. The staff at Little Leaf welcomed them warmly. Bright smiles, a clipboard full of sign-in sheets, the scent of apple juice and floor cleaner. The place looked immaculate, normal, exactly what any parent would expect when dropping off their toddler. But Diesel wasn't interested in appearances. He passed the staff without hesitation, head low, nose twitching. "Sorry," James said, tightening the leash. "He's just curious. This won't take long." The director, a woman in her mid-40s named Marlene, chuckled softly. "We've had dogs visit before. They love the snack closet." But Diesel ignored the food. He headed straight for the nap room. That's when it began. At first, he sniffed cautiously, circling slowly near the edge of a colorful foam mat. Then suddenly, he started digging. His claws scraped sharply against the laminate floor. Diesel let out a low, urgent growl that sent chills down James's spine. It wasn't aggression. It was something else, a mix of fear and resolve. James knelt down. "Diesel, what is it, boy?" The scratching grew more frantic. The mat shifted slightly, revealing an unusual seam in the floorboards. "Is there something underneath here?" James asked, glancing at Marlene, who had just entered with a puzzled expression. "No," she replied quickly. "It's probably just old glue. That spot's always been uneven." James said nothing. Instead, he looked at Diesel's face. The dog's eyes were fixed on the floor. His body was tense, tail stiff, not playful, not curious. Alert and trained, the kind of alert that had saved lives. James stood slowly. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to take a closer look beneath this mat." Marlene hesitated. "Is that really necessary? The kids will be back from circle time any minute, and they get upset if the routine is disturbed." James didn't move. "Just give me a moment." He peeled back the mat, revealing a faint outline in the wood. A perfect square, no larger than a dog crate. Someone had carelessly painted over it. The floorboards didn't even match. The nails were old and rusted flat. James felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. Diesel barked sharply once, then again, louder this time. The sound echoed through the room, cutting through the cheerful daycare music like an alarm. A few children peeked nervously from the hallway. A young assistant, barely 20, stood frozen near the door, her lips pale. James turned to her. "Are you all right?" She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just startled. That dog's bark is pretty loud." She avoided his gaze. James stood slowly, resting his hand on Diesel's back. The shepherd was now pawing at the square, as if trying to dig through it. "We're going to need to document this," James said aloud, more to himself than anyone else. "If you're moved by stories of animal heroes and second chances, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals, where true bravery has 4 paws." Marlene stepped forward again, this time more firmly. "Officer Nolan, I don't think this is appropriate during business hours. We run a very clean, fully compliant daycare here." James didn't respond. He knelt and tapped gently on the wooden panel. It sounded hollow. He tapped again. This time the assistant let out a soft gasp. "What's your name?" James asked, standing and facing her directly. The girl froze. "Me?" "Yes, Jenna." "How long have you worked here, Jenna?" 3 months. "Have you ever heard anything strange in this room?" She swallowed hard. Sometimes I thought I heard noises beneath the floor, like crying. But Marlene said it was just the plumbing. James looked back down. Plumbing doesn't cry. He stepped out of the nap room and radioed dispatch. Dispatch, this is Officer Nolan at Little Leaf Daycare. I've got a possible structural issue and a K-9 alert. Requesting backup and building inspection. Possible code violation. Diesel barked again, deeper and sharper this time. James turned to see a little boy, no older than 4, approach Diesel and point to the floor. That's where the other kids go, the boy whispered. James crouched down. What do you mean, buddy? The boy glanced around, then leaned in close. They go down there when they don't listen. The lady says they have to learn to be quiet. James felt his chest tighten. He stood quickly. Marlene tried to speak, but James cut her off. No one leaves this building until I get a team here. I need access to every staff file, every floor plan, and all licensing documents. She opened her mouth to protest, but Diesel growled low and long. Not threatening, just certain that something was wrong, and so was James. The daycare had gone silent. Too silent. Officer James Nolan stood near the nap room doorway, clipboard in hand, waiting for backup. Diesel remained fixed on the scratched spot on the floor like a guard, body tense, ears alert, nose close to the ground. Across the room, Marlene sat stiffly on a small blue plastic chair, arms crossed tightly. She hadn't said much since James called for backup, just kept glancing at the floor, then away, as if trying to avoid something she wished she could forget. Jenna, the young assistant, was in the break room, nervously sipping orange juice from a paper cup. Her hands trembled so badly James had offered to get her water, but she refused. She wouldn't meet anyone's eyes either. James checked his watch. 8 minutes. That's how long it had been since he called in the alert. He'd requested structural engineers, a child welfare officer, and another patrol unit for secure entry. They were on their way, but time seemed to drag. Diesel let out a sudden grunt and resumed scratching, claws scraping the old laminate. James looked down. The outline of the trapdoor was now even clearer with the rug peeled back. But what caught his attention next wasn't the trapdoor itself. Right next to it was something else. A dull, reddish-brown smear near the edge of the mat. James crouched down. What's this? He ran a gloved finger over the stain. It wasn't paint. It felt sticky and had soaked deep into the wood grain. He sniffed cautiously. Iron, rust, but no fresh blood. Old blood? He stood up quickly. Marlene, he said, his voice sharp now, why is there blood in the nap room? She stiffened. That can't be blood. This is a daycare. Kids scrape their knees all the time. There are accidents, but none that look like this. James snapped a photo with his phone, then another with a forensic tag. Diesel barked sharply once, as if in agreement. Marlene's voice wavered. Look, we've had problems before. Kids fall. Sometimes they hide cuts. I can't watch every child every second. James narrowed his eyes. And what about that boy earlier? The one who said kids go down there when they don't listen. Marlene's face flushed. Kids have wild imaginations. He's only 4. James said nothing. Instead, he turned to Jenna, who had just peeked her head into the hallway. Jenna, he said gently, can I talk to you for a moment? She hesitated, then stepped forward, still holding her paper cup. How long have you worked here? He asked. 3 months, she whispered. Has anyone ever shown you what's under the floor? She shook her head. No, but I've heard things. What kind of things? Jenna's eyes filled with tears, and she whimpered softly. Not like someone trying to hold back crying, but like a scared animal. I told Marlene, but she said it was just the plumbing knocking when the heat comes on. But it didn't sound like pipes. James stepped closer, lowering his voice. Have you ever seen children disappear from here? Kids who never came back? Jenna looked down. I don't know, she said. They don't let us see the full sign-in sheet. Sometimes a kid would be here Monday and gone by Tuesday. I thought maybe they just unenrolled. I didn't want to ask too many questions. Marlene doesn't like that. James took a slow breath and nodded. Thank you, Jenna. That helps a lot. A loud knock came from the entrance. Finally, back up, 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by a building inspector and a child protective services agent. James met them near the front desk and quickly explained what Diesel had found. The visible bloodstain and the strange comments from one of the children. The building inspector, an older man with a gray beard and clipboard, scratched his head. A hidden crawl space under a daycare. That's not standard. I'll need to take a look. James led the group to the nap room. Diesel stepped back as the inspector knelt beside the trapdoor and tapped the floor with a metal probe. "Hollow," the inspector muttered. "And look at the grain. This isn't factory flooring. Someone replaced this panel by hand." He pried a corner loose with a crowbar. A soft creak followed by a cold rush of air escaped. The trapdoor lifted slowly, revealing a narrow wooden shaft beneath. It dropped about 6 feet straight down, with a wooden ladder bolted to one side. The air that rose was stale and sour. Everyone recoiled slightly at the smell. James shone his flashlight down. Concrete floor, bare walls, and a small pile of something in the far corner. "Jesus," one of the officers muttered. "There's a room down there." The CPS agent turned to Marlene. "You didn't disclose this space in your licensing paperwork. Why?" Marlene's lips trembled. "I didn't know it was there." Jenna let out a noise, half laugh, half sob. "She's lying. She always walked around that corner. She knew." James turned to Diesel. "Ready, partner?" Diesel barked once. James took a deep breath and descended the ladder, Diesel close behind. The flashlight beam swept slowly across the room. What they saw sent a chill down his spine. It wasn't just a storage area. Old sleeping bags were spread on the floor, child-sized, empty food wrappers, a broken toy, and in the far corner, a dented aluminum bucket. The air smelled of urine and mold. James turned slowly, the flashlight illuminating scratch marks on the walls, some shallow, some deep. He moved the beam toward the ceiling and spotted a tiny grate, a vent just big enough to let faint sounds through from above. James muttered, "This wasn't meant to be a panic room. This was a holding cell." Diesel let out a low growl and padded toward the far end, sniffing along the back wall. He stopped and barked, short, urgent. James joined him and discovered a hidden compartment behind a wooden panel, partially rotted from moisture. Inside, he found 2 dolls, a sippy cup with a child's name faded in Sharpie, and a small medical bracelet. His heart raced as he picked it up slowly. The bracelet read, "Harper L. Dube, 11/18/2020. He swallowed hard. This was recent. Back upstairs, the CPS agent and officers had begun interviewing staff and securing the building. Parents were being notified, and authorities were cross-referencing missing persons reports with the daycare's enrollment records. James climbed back up, his face pale, clutching the bracelet. "Call in a forensic team," he said quietly, "and a trauma response unit." Diesel stayed close, body tense, eyes fixed on the hole in the floor. As James stood in the doorway watching emergency vehicles arrive, one thought kept repeating in his mind. How many children had cried down there unheard? And how many times had Diesel, even in retirement, sensed what no one else dared to believe? The news spread like wildfire. By noon, half the town knew about the trapdoor beneath Little Leaf Daycare. Some believed it was an old storm shelter. Others whispered of something far worse. James Nolan didn't deal in rumors, only facts. And what he'd uncovered beneath that floor was no accident or oversight. It was deliberate. A sealed room hidden from view, filled with bedding, wrappers, toys, and a medical bracelet that didn't belong to any child currently enrolled. By the time the forensic team arrived, James had already involved 2 detectives, the CPS director from Marion County and a missing persons investigator from Indianapolis. They all wore the same stunned expression as they entered the nap room, as if the ground had been pulled from beneath them. But it was Diesel's behavior that told the true story. The old shepherd refused to leave the trapdoor, circling it like a soldier guarding a fallen comrade. Every so often he barked sharply, stared at the open hatch, and let out a low growl, as if daring anyone to go back down there. James knelt beside him. "What is it, boy?" Diesel didn't move. James reached out and scratched behind his ears. "You know something else, don't you?" Then he remembered something from their days in Kandahar, a village raid where Diesel had stopped dead in a hallway that looked clear. The dog wouldn't budge despite James urging him forward. 10 seconds later, the floor collapsed, revealing 2 women and a child trapped in a wired chamber. Diesel had sensed danger then, and he was sensing it now. James stood and turned to the forensics lead, a woman named Mallory Jacobs. "There's something else down there," he said. "Something we missed." Mallory looked surprised. "You searched the whole chamber, right?" "Yeah," James replied, "but not everything. Diesel thinks there's more." She shrugged but nodded. "Then we go back in." Together, James, Mallory, and Diesel descended again, wearing gloves, masks, and headlamps. The trapdoor had been widened for easier access. The smell was worse now, musty and sour, with a distinctly human undertone. The concrete room below looked the same. Dolls, a dented bucket, old bedding. But Mallory began scanning the walls with an infrared sensor while James watched Diesel. Diesel moved with purpose, heading to the far end where the wooden panel had been. This time he pressed his nose to the corner and barked. Short, rhythmic, urgent. James moved quickly, kneeling beside the spot and knocking on the wall. Hollow. He grabbed a pry bar from the gear bag and wedged it into the seam. It cracked slightly, splinters peeling back. Behind the panel was a narrow tunnel, no more than 4 feet tall. Crawl space only. Jesus, Mallory muttered. That's not on any blueprint. James looked at her. You staying topside? Hell no, she said. I'm right behind you. James got on his stomach and crawled in first. Diesel followed like a shadow. The air was cold and dusty. The tunnel twisted once to the right, then opened into a smaller chamber, and that's when they saw it. A child's shoe, small with Velcro straps, caked in dirt. Next to it lay a cracked sippy cup, a pink headband, and a torn page from a children's book. Brown bear, what do you see? James felt his throat tighten as he scanned the cramped space, his flashlight beam trembling slightly. The chamber was barely 10 feet wide. No lights, no bedding, just remnants of children who should never have been there. Then Diesel barked sharply. James spun around. The dog was sniffing a large metal vent hidden behind a wooden slat in the wall. Just like before, Mallory crawled in behind them. What is it? She asked. James pointed. Something's behind that. They worked quickly, using a crowbar and flashlight to pry the slat loose. As it came free, a rush of stale, warm air escaped. And then a sound. Faint but unmistakable, a cough. Then another. James and Mallory froze. Did you hear that? He whispered. Mallory nodded. That's someone. James leaned toward the vent. Hello? Can you hear me? Silence. Then after a long pause, a tiny voice whispered, Help! James's heart stopped. He turned back toward the tunnel. We've got a live one. It took nearly 20 minutes for the full emergency team to reach the second chamber. Diesel refused to leave the tunnel, and James had to leash him and pull him back when firefighters and rescue personnel arrived with oxygen tanks and stretchers. Inside the hidden chamber, behind 2 layers of paneling and a false vent, they found her, a little girl no older than 4, curled in a ball behind a pile of dusty blankets. She was barely conscious, her lips cracked and skin pale and clammy from dehydration. James knelt beside her. It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. The girl's eyes fluttered open. Doggy, she whispered. Diesel stepped forward and gently licked her cheek. For the first time in what had likely been days, maybe weeks, she smiled. Upstairs, chaos erupted in waves. Ambulances lined the street. Detectives swarmed the property. Parents screamed. News vans pulled up to the front gates. CPS officers escorted children out one by one, shielding them from the flashing cameras. Marlene was taken into custody after Jenna, trembling and tearful, revealed the full truth. She made us keep quiet, Jenna said. She said the child had special needs and that her parents were dangerous. She said the girl needed protection. I didn't know she meant underground. Records soon confirmed the girl's identity. Harper Lynn, age 4, reported missing 6 days earlier from a town 30 miles away. Her mother had been pleading for media attention, but the case hadn't gained traction until now. When Harper was wheeled out on a stretcher, Diesel walked beside her. Camera flashes exploded. Someone shouted, That dog! He's the one who found her! James placed a hand on Diesel's head. He always finds them. That night, James sat alone on his front porch, Diesel resting at his feet. It had been the longest day of his life. Harper was safe, hydrated, under medical care, and more questions were coming. Who built those hidden rooms? Who else knew? Was Marlene acting alone? But for now, all James could think about was Diesel, the dog who had once saved him in a war zone, and now had saved a little girl from a nightmare beneath a daycare. He looked down at the old shepherd. You're not done yet, are you? Diesel looked up, tail thumping once. Somehow James knew this story was far from over. James Nolan hadn't slept, not even a minute. At 3:12 a.m., he sat in his living room, a mug of untouched coffee in one hand, Diesel curled up at his feet. The old dog was finally resting, ears twitching in a dream, but James couldn't stop hearing the little girl's voice echo in his mind. Help, doggy. 6 days underground, and Harper Lynn still had the strength to smile when Diesel licked her cheek. That image stayed with James like a tattoo on his soul. He'd been on the force nearly 15 years. He'd seen burned homes, domestic violence, fatal crashes. He'd carried bodies from rivers, but nothing shook him like what they found beneath that daycare. The worst part was this. If Diesel hadn't clawed at that floor, no one would have ever looked. No one would have known. And somewhere amid the trauma, bloodstains, and hidden crawl spaces, James had a gnawing suspicion. They still hadn't uncovered everything. By sunrise, investigators were already digging, not just into the building itself, but into records, permits, and former employees. That's when things started to smell worse than the stale basement air. Little Leaf Daycare had changed hands 3 times in 12 years. The original owner, Francine Brewer, ran it from 2011 to 2016, then suddenly vanished after a CPS investigation was launched into unexplained injuries involving 3 children. That case had quietly closed with no charges, citing insufficient evidence. After Brewer disappeared, a shell company purchased the property. It was later leased to a woman named Annabelle Curran, who renamed it Bright Days Early Learning and operated it for 3 years before abruptly shutting down. No official explanation given. Then came Marlene. She took over the building in 2020 under yet another LLC, renamed it Little Leaf, repainted the walls, hired new staff, and left the basement off every single licensing form. When detectives confronted her at the county jail, she claimed ignorance. I didn't build the chamber. It was already there. But when pressed, you used it, Marlene remained silent. James didn't buy it. Later that afternoon, James stood with Detective L. Roby and a structural forensics team inside the second chamber where Harper had been rescued. The air still felt heavy, as if holding its breath. Diesel sniffed the walls again, quieter now, but still uneasy. "See this?" the lead forensics expert said, pointing to the left corner. "That concrete's newer than the rest. Different mix, less mold." James crouched down. "So someone sealed this off recently. Within the last year, I'd bet money on it." Detective Roby tapped a small chip of concrete with her pen. "You think there's something behind that wall?" "Could be," the forensics expert replied. Could be more space, or just a decoy." Diesel padded toward the wall, sniffed twice, then sat. "That's his alert posture," James said. Roby looked over. "Even off-duty always. When he sits like that, he's telling you something's there. He just doesn't know how to get to it." "Well," Roby said, straightening up, "let's find out." It took nearly 2 hours to break through the wall. They worked carefully to avoid damaging anything inside. When the final layer cracked, a foul gust of air poured out. Even the professionals flinched. They shone a high-powered light through the opening. What they saw wasn't another room. It was a tunnel, long, narrow, with dirt walls reinforced by plywood beams, no more than 3 feet high. A passage that looked hand-dug and very recent. The forensic tech turned to James. "This wasn't built years ago." "That dirt's fresh," Roby muttered. "Where the hell does it lead?" James looked at Diesel. "You ready?" Diesel stood, belly low, tail straight, ears sharp. Flashlights, gloves, headlamps on. James, Robbie, and a backup officer entered the tunnel. It felt endless. 50 feet in, the air grew colder. The tunnel forked once, then again. Whoever built it had a purpose. Then they found something buried in the dirt. A lunchbox. Metal, dented, rusted at the hinges. James opened it slowly. Inside were drawings, childlike crayon figures, names scrawled in shaky handwriting. One showed a child trapped in a box underground with "No Talking" written in red crayon above it. Another depicted stick figures with black lines over their mouths, crossed out. The last showed a dog with big ears and brown fur and a girl holding its paw, Harper. James swallowed hard. Someone had kept children down here long enough for them to draw pictures about it. The tunnel narrowed after that, eventually ending at a wooden grate leading up to another floorboard. James looked up. "It's under another room." They took a GPS reading. It wasn't beneath the daycare anymore. It was under the building next door. The adjacent property had once been a dentist's office, then a church for 2 years. Now it stood abandoned. Windows boarded, lawn overgrown, locks rusted shut. James and Roby secured a warrant within hours. When the team entered, the smell hit them first. Not rot, not mold, but formaldehyde, the kind used to preserve specimens. They swept through the ground floor quickly. Empty rooms, cracked linoleum, broken chairs, when Diesel barked once, then twice. At the back wall of what had once been the waiting area, behind a sagging bookshelf, they discovered another door, secured with a padlock. A crowbar made quick work of it. Inside was a room straight out of a nightmare. Shelves lined with storage bins, old journals, cassette tapes, and a wall plastered with Polaroid photos. All of children, their faces blurred, names scrawled beneath. Some of the names matched missing persons reports dating back as far as 2009. James stepped back, bile rising in his throat. Roby whispered, "This isn't just a rogue daycare. This is a trafficking operation." James felt a chill wash over him. Diesel, standing motionless in the center of the room, let out the softest whimper James had ever heard. Back at the precinct, the FBI was now fully involved. State police, task forces, and media swarmed in. What began as a K-9 alert at a small-town daycare had exploded into a multi-agency investigation spanning 3 counties and nearly 15 years. James sat at his desk, staring at the files, photos, and timelines spread across the wall. So many names, so many children, some rescued, some still missing, and one German shepherd who had never stopped doing his job. He looked down at Diesel, curled beside his chair, head resting on his paws, still alert even in sleep. "You knew," James whispered. "You always knew, and this time people were finally listening." By the 5th day of the investigation, Officer James Nolan's office no longer resembled an office. It looked like a war room. Polaroids covered every inch of the bulletin board. Color-coded pins marked names, locations, dates, some crossed out, some circled. Maps were taped to the walls. A dry erase board held columns labeled known victims, unconfirmed names, suspected connections, and locations yet to search. In the center of it all sat a cracked lunchbox filled with crayon drawings. Under the desk lay Diesel, head between his paws, tail flicking slightly every time the door opened. James hadn't gone home in 3 days. Not really. He'd showered at the station, grabbed coffee from the diner across the street, and kept a change of clothes in his trunk. There was no time for rest, not with the case growing bigger by the hour. What started as one sealed trapdoor had exploded into a statewide manhunt for a network of people hiding children beneath buildings, falsifying daycare licenses and making them vanish across jurisdictions. And now, someone was working hard to erase whatever evidence remained. It began with the files. Detective Elise Roby called James into the precinct's records room that morning, looking furious. "Take a look," she said, slapping a folder onto the table. James flipped it open. "Little Leaf licensing packet," he said. "We already have this." "Wrong," Roby said. "We had a partial copy. This is the full version. I pulled it from the county archives myself." James scanned the documents again, then spotted it. A signature on the final page. Annabelle Curran. She was the one who ran the daycare before Marlene. James raised his eyebrows. "Didn't she shut down in 2019? "Yep," Roby replied. "But here's the twist. Curran didn't just run Little Leaf. Before that, she owned 2 other facilities in southern Indiana under different names. Both shut down after licensing violations. And get this, she was married to a man named Elijah Ross." James felt a chill run through him. Elijah Ross, the pastor who had run the old church next door. Bingo! He sank slowly into his chair. "So, you're telling me the daycare and the abandoned church were linked through a married couple?" "Not just that," Roby said, lowering her voice. "They own both properties through a holding company called Golden Harvest Development. Sound familiar?" James blinked. "That's the name on the shell company that bought the daycare after Francine Brewer disappeared." "Exactly," Roby confirmed. "They've been using the same company to shuffle properties, change names, and move kids around for over a decade." James stood and began pacing. Every time CPS got close, they switched ownership, changed the name, repainted the walls, and moved the operation a few blocks away. And every time, the records got thinner, Robbie added. Permits vanish. Staff files disappear. CPS reports get mysteriously closed. No one ever connects the dots. James glanced at the bulletin board where Harper Lynn's photo was pinned beneath a yellow sticky note that read, "Recovered alive." "How many kids are still missing?" he asked. "2," Robbie replied. "From 2009 to now, most under 6 years old. All had brief enrollments at facilities tied to Curran or Ross." James felt the walls closing in. He turned to Diesel, who was now sitting up, ears perked. "You ready for one more?" he asked quietly. Diesel wagged his tail once. They drove to the county records annex. an ugly beige building smelling of old paper and burnt coffee. A contact from the mayor's office had called James that morning, warning something odd was happening. At the front desk, the clerk waved them back without hesitation. "I didn't want to say this over the phone," she said, "but someone came in yesterday with a badge, claimed to be from CPS, and requested all licensing files for Golden Harvest properties. I thought it was legit, but something felt off." James leaned in. "Did you get a name?" "Just initials. He signed the visitor log as ER, but I've already checked. There's no active CPS investigator with those initials in this county." "Did he take anything?" "Yeah, 3 boxes of files, including old facility records from 2014 and 2015. That includes a building in New Harmony, one we never connected until now." James cursed under his breath. They were getting too close. Someone inside the system was helping erase the trail. Back at the station, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jenna, the daycare assistant who had spoken up, remembered something she thought was unimportant. She texted James late that night. "I remembered something. I think one of the kids left something in the toy chest. A name tag or bracelet. They told me never to open that chest, but I think it might still be there." James and Roby returned to Little Leaf after hours. The building was now an active crime scene, sealed off and guarded, but they had clearance. The toy chest sat under the window in the nap room, bright yellow with a rainbow painted on the side, innocent-looking. James pried it open. Inside were toys, old stuffed animals, a broken tambourine, and tucked beneath a stack of books, a laminated hospital wristband. He held it up, name Caden M. Doby 203. 2017 admit date, 05/12/2022. James frowned. Caden wasn't on any daycare rosters. Roby checked her phone. "There's a Caden Mendes reported missing in Evansville last year. 5 years old. Last seen leaving daycare with a female guardian." Case went cold. James turned the wristband over and noticed a crayon scrawl on the back. "Doggy will find us." He blinked hard, throat tightening. Caden believed someone was coming. Roby said softly. "That's why he left this," James whispered, "and Diesel did." It all began to click. The tunnels, the rotation of buildings, the shell companies. Every move was carefully planned to stay one step ahead. Children shuffled like shadows, records deleted, paper trails burned. But not anymore. Now they had connections, names, evidence, and a German shepherd with an unerring nose for the truth. Back at the station, James stood before the bulletin board and added a new sticky note beneath Caden's photo. "Believed alive. Search ongoing." Then he looked down at Diesel. "You didn't just find Harper," he said softly. "You gave every one of those kids a second chance." And deep down, James knew the final piece of this nightmare was about to come to light. The first arrest came at 6:17 a.m. Elijah Ross, former pastor, daycare financier, and co-owner of multiple Golden Harvest properties, was apprehended at a rental cabin deep in the Kentucky woods. He'd grown out his beard and shaved his head. Authorities found 2 fake IDs, an encrypted laptop, and a duffel bag stuffed with burner phones and cash. He didn't resist. He didn't say a word. By the time James saw the news flash on the precinct TV, federal agents were already knocking on doors across 3 states. Annabelle Curran was arrested at a private residence in Terre Haute. 2 other employees from Bright Days Early Learning turned themselves in once charges were filed, and slowly, painfully, the web began to unravel. Golden Harvest wasn't just a shell company, it was a front. Over a dozen buildings across Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky had been used as temporary re-education chambers for children deemed unmanageable. Some were kids with autism or speech delays. Some had been labeled defiant or slow learners. Others? No one really knew how they ended up there. But James knew one thing. They were all victims, and none of it would have come to light without Diesel. Harper Lynn was now back with her mother. Their reunion had been quiet and off-camera at a secure trauma recovery center outside Indianapolis. Stephanie, Harper's mother, held her daughter like she never wanted to let go again. James watched from a distance, his hand resting on Diesel's back. "She asks about him every morning," Stephanie told him. "Does she say anything else?" James asked gently. Stephanie nodded. "She says she always knew he'd find her." In the weeks that followed, Crestfield transformed. The daycare building was demolished by court order. Its foundation was excavated, and the debris sent for forensic analysis. A plaque now stands on the site, honoring the children found and those still missing. The church next door was converted into a multi-agency child welfare center, funded by donations from across the country. Volunteers arrived from Chicago, Columbus, and Louisville to help create therapy rooms, legal aid offices, and a memorial hallway for survivors. And Diesel? Diesel became a local legend. Kids painted murals of him downtown. A bakery started selling Hero Dog biscuits in his honor. One teacher even wrote a children's book titled The Dog Who Found the Light. But the greatest recognition came one warm evening a month later at the Crestfield Civic Center. James stood backstage adjusting his tie. He hated events like this. Public speeches, applause, cameras. He was a patrol cop at heart. But tonight wasn't about him. It was about Diesel, the MC, a well-known news anchor from Indianapolis, stood at the podium before hundreds of parents, officials, survivors, and rescue workers. And now, she said, it is our great honor to present the Silver Paw Medal for Distinguished Animal Service, the first of its kind, to a K-9 who not only served his country, but came out of retirement to save the lives of innocent children right here in Crestfield. The crowd rose to their feet as Diesel trotted onto the stage beside James, wearing his polished vest and ID tag. He blinked against the bright lights but didn't flinch. James accepted the medal on Diesel's behalf. Stepping up to the microphone, he said, "I've worked alongside Diesel for over 10 years. He saved my life, protected strangers, and sensed danger long before anyone else could. But this was different. He heard what none of us wanted to face, and he refused to stop until we listened." The applause was overwhelming. James glanced down at Diesel, who wagged his tail once. That was all the thanks he needed. After the ceremony, James led Diesel to the edge of the Civic Center lawn. A gentle breeze rustled the trees, and laughter drifted from nearby families. Children ran freely across the grass. Parents took pictures by the memorial wall. For a moment, it felt like peace. James crouched beside Diesel and scratched under his chin. "You did good, partner." "Real good." Diesel nudged James's chest with his nose, then settled beside him in the grass. James leaned back, gazing up at the stars. The question he'd been avoiding crept into his mind. What now? The case was technically closed, the ring dismantled, the property seized. The victims, those who could be found, were safe. But trauma doesn't end with arrests. Justice doesn't erase memories. There would always be more work to do. Still, for the first time in a long while, James allowed himself to breathe, to hope, to believe that one dog really could change the course of many lives. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey. It's easy to overlook the heroes among us, especially the four-legged ones. But Diesel showed us that courage doesn't retire, that instinct and loyalty can save lives, and that even in the darkest places, someone is always listening. What do you think? Should retired service dogs be given a chance to serve again in community programs? Or do they deserve peace after years of duty? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more true stories of bravery, healing, and the incredible bond between humans and animals.